So first, the energy transition is about solving three tasks. Task number one is to decarbonize the electricity system. Task number two is to then electrify everything that is possible to electrify. And task number three is to get rid of the remaining emissions through e-fuel, biofuel, and CCUS. And these tasks have approximately 40%, 40%, and 20% of the mitigation of emission. Historically, electricity has actually had the highest emission per kilowatt hours of end use. So then if you start to electrify things without decarbonizing electricity, you're only increasing global emissions. So that's why it's important that it follows that sequence. And in that sense, it's not a big problem that it's some slowdown in the task number 2 and 3, as long as the first task is going fast. And despite this very kind of, this new policy from America that is really trying to slow down everything related to the energy transition, despite that, it's still going at a high pace. I think honestly not for when you talk about carbon dioxide emissions, limiting that to 500 gigaton. That is almost a too ambitious goal. However, with a very fast progress for all these technologies that is a part of the energy transition, maybe net zero by 2060 or 2070 could be possible. And then this corresponds to about 950 gigaton of emissions, which corresponds to 1.7 degree of global warming. However, methane emissions is also an important part of the total scope. You actually have an upside that could be 0.1 to 0.2 degree global warming that is avoided from fast methane emissions. And then the combination of net zero by 2060 to 2070 for CO2, plus a very fast progress on methane, then you could still actually reach this level that you asked about. But that is not through carbon dioxide alone, it's through faster development of methane reduction measures. Yes, of course, the whole rhetoric, the whole narrative from the US has shifted very much away from being proponents and leaders in many aspects for energy transition to basically not talk about energy transition anymore, but rather talk about energy affordability and energy security, for example, and not really energy sustainability. But if you still look at the overall impact, it's not had a big negative impact so far on the energy transition, because still almost $1 trillion is invested in solar and wind and batteries globally. And these investments hasn't slowed down very much. It's still all these investments are happening. And the energy transition is not going to happen because we stop producing oil and gas. It's only because we stop consuming oil and gas from having alternatives on the end user's side. So you can let the market take care of the oil and gas production. And if you want to promote the energy transition, you should focus on technologies that will take away the need to use oil and gas. And that is, for example, electric vehicles and renewable power that will take away the need for gas in the power system to some degree. Trump has already taken down the stimulation of electric vehicles, but not the most important one, which is a tax relief of $7,500 per family. But that is likely to be taken away by the end of this year. But there is some negotiations happening, because that will also hurt a lot of employment in US. A lot of workers are working with these vessels, and they will reduce the demand for these vessels, which will or vehicles that will actually not be positive for many of the people that are also supporting Trump. So I think maybe the last word is not fully said, even on that session. We didn't have very high expectations in any case for the electrification of cars in the United States. And looking at China, for example, or UK, both of these countries are already above 50% and progressing fast towards electric fleet. So yes, I'm not too negative either on these technologies and the pace, even if you have some headwinds in the US at the moment. I think it's not, underlying decline in oil wells are very fast. It's almost 15%. So meaning that if you do nothing in 1 year, no drilling, no intervention, oil production will go down from 103 million barrels per day to below 90 million barrels per day in 1 year. So meaning that even to stand still, you have to drill a lot. So still this logic with supply-demand balances is valid even in a flat or declining overall demand in the oil market. So still OPEC will have a function to try to stabilize the prices from regulating the marginal supply in this market. So I think that OPEC could play a constructive role to stabilize the prices also for the next 2 to 3 decades, even in a declining global oil market. Yes, first, I think that history has shown that actually China has over-delivered on their expectations. They have delivered first. Actually, for example, they had an ambition to reach 1,200 gigawatt of renewables by 2030. But they actually reached that level already last year. So they were 6 years ahead of schedule. And we have seen that in thermal power generation, we have seen that China was actually a negative 4% in the first quarter in 2025. So this just shows that China is going actually faster than expected on this decarbonization agenda. So 2030, I think they will manage with a good margin. Yeah, of course, China is playing an essential role in that because they are the provider of the most important technologies like solar panels and batteries. They have the largest, by far, the largest market share for this, and also the leading technologies in terms of cost efficiency. So really, they are in the front of driving also not only the Chinese energy transition, but the global energy transition. Yes. No, I think that under this label, you see a lot of investments happening also in combination of solar and batteries, for example. So I think that is a technology that could make, for example, some regions in Africa leapfrog one generation of energy implementation, that it could be cheaper to go directly to solar panels and batteries and electric cars rather than go through a thermal power plant, a coal-fired power plant. So it's in a similar fashion that many places of Africa went directly from not any telephony at all to mobile telephony. We could see a similar development within some parts of Africa for this. But that depends on how cheap access they have to local gas, for example. If they have a lot of local gas, it could make a lot of sense to build gas-fired power plant. But if they don't have that and need to import that gas, they might be much better off from going directly to solar, for example. That is something that would serve both these receiving countries, the global climate, and China as a provider. So I think that is a very good kind of ambition to have.